Everyone, in this video, let's discuss about SA 610 using the work of internal auditors. In the previous video, we have discussed about SA 600 using the work of another auditor. The next video will discuss about the auditor's expert. Now, let's focus on SA 610. Can be discussed in broadly 6 heads. Okay, first head is the scope of this essay. This essay deals with the external auditor's responsibility if he is using the work of the internal auditor. Whenever an external auditor is using the work of the internal auditor, this standard is going to give guidance. Okay, in which areas? Whenever he is going to use the work of internal audit function in obtaining the audit evidence. Okay, and then whenever he is going to use the work of internal auditors to provide direct assistance under the direction, supervision and review of the external auditor, DSR of the external auditor. Okay, before moving on further, let's understand the meaning of the internal audit function and the internal auditors. Let's go to the definition. Okay. Internal audit function, a function of an entity that performs assurance and consulting activity designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the governance, risk management, internal control processes. So it is basically a function which oversees and reports to the board of directors or the TCWG with respect to the design, implementation, effectiveness of controls which is placed over governance, risk management and other internal control processes. Basically, those controls which are going to have an effect on the IFCOFA reporting, is internal financial control over financial reporting, right? Those controls are going to be reviewed under the IFCOFA reporting. Those will be checked and reviewed by the internal audit function, basically. Okay, within the internal purposes, externally it will be reported by the external auditor. Internal purposes, such similar function will be carried out by the internal audit function. Then internal auditors are those who report on a periodic basis, like the use of internal auditors to perform audit procedures under the direction, supervision and review of the external auditor. Direct assistance would mean, so external auditor is going to give the certain areas and the certain principles to be covered. Those will be covered with the help of internal auditors. Now, let's understand the external auditor's responsibility for the audit. The external auditor has the sole responsibility for the opinion expressed, and responsibility is not reduced by the external auditors' use of the work of the internal audit function or the internal auditors to provide direct assistance on the engagement. So the external auditor continues to be responsible for the opinion he is going to express on the financial statements. He cannot pass on the responsibility to any other person. Okay, he is going to sign the document, so he is the one who is responsible. Now, objectives of the external auditor. To determine whether the work of the internal audit function or direct assistance from the internal auditors can be used, and if so, in which areas and to what extent, and having made the determination, if using the work of the internal audit function to determine whether the work is adequate for the purpose of audit, and if using the work of internal auditors to appropriately direct, supervise and review their work, which means, so first I have to decide whether I am able to obtain the work from the internal audit function or the internal auditors, and to check the adequacy of their work, and if I'm okay with taking the work from them, taking the help from them, then I have to determine in which areas and to what extent I can seek their help. Okay, and once I've decided that, I should, for the work of internal audit function, I should determine whether the work is adequate, whether I will be able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence based on their work or based on their report. And for the internal auditor's direct assistance, I have to check whether I will be able to appropriately direct, supervise and review their work. Objective of the standard. Now, let's move on with based on the pronouncements now. Yeah. Relationship between SA 315 and SA 610. Before that, I will say one thing. All those which are marked in green in this PDF will be like, those are the questions. Okay, like those could be formed as questions. While now we are going to see the answers with the keywords will be marked in blue. Okay. Many entities establish internal audit functions as a part of the internal control and governance structures. The objective and scope of the internal audit function, the nature of its responsibilities, and its organizational status, including the function's authority and accountability, vary widely and depend on the size and structure of the entity and the requirements of the management wherever applicable, those charged with governance. So, internal audit function scope will be determined by the board of directors or the TCWG wherever applicable based on the size, structure, and requirements of the management. SA 315 addresses how the knowledge and experience of the internal audit function can inform the external audit's understanding of the entity and its environment and identification assessment of risk of material misstatement. See, the external auditor has the responsibility or has a duty to go over the internal audit reports if they are applicable, right? So, such reports give an understanding or helps the external auditor to understand the nature of the entity and in the environment in which it is operating, including there could be some lapse of control that could also be mentioned in the report. That could be an area which could lead to higher risk of material misstatement. SA 315 also explains how effective communication between the internal and external auditors also can create an environment in which the external auditor can be informed of significant matters that may affect auditors' work. See, if I have a good rapport between the internal auditor, then he will be able to communicate with me those lapses in control at the earliest possible moment, okay? So that I can plan the audit in the initial stage itself rather than changing the plan at or amending the plan at a later stage. Depending on whether the internal audit functions, organization status, and relevant policies procedures adequately support the objectivity of the internal auditors, the level of competency of the internal audit function, and whether the function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, the external auditor may also be used able to use the work of the internal audit function in a constructive and a complementary manner. So these are the factors that have to be checked. Okay, later on we'll read it, but again, let's have an overview here itself. Objectivity. Objectivity would mean the whether I am partial, whether I am biased. Okay, I should not be biased to any actions that are being taken in the client's place. Okay, then competency, whether the internal audit is competent enough. For example, there could be some branches, okay, which are outside India, okay, or divisions outside India where internal auditor can be a person other than CA. So I have to check whether the internal audit is competent enough to comply with the accounting and auditing requirements. Now, I am also to check that he applies some systematic and disciplined approach rather than following some random approach. He should be applying and disciplined approach. Okay, then this essay addresses the external auditor's responsibility when, based on the external auditor's preliminary understanding of the internal audit function, obtained as a result of procedures performed under SA 315. See, SA 315 have to perform certain procedures to obtain understanding, right? Understanding based on the entity's environment and its how it operates, right? So with that understanding, I may also have some preliminary view of the internal audit function. Now, such use of that work, so I may also place some reliance based on my understanding on the works which have already been provided by the internal audit function. Such use of the work modifies the nature, timing, and reduces the extent of audit procedure. See, for some areas he has already covered an extensive test. So I may just do test of controls there, okay? I may not do a detailed audit procedure there. That reduces the extent of audit procedure and it also reduces timing for that audit. In addition, this essay also addresses the external auditor's responsibilities if considering using internal auditors to provide direct assistance. There may be individuals in an entity that perform similar procedures to those performed by the internal audit function. However, unless performed by an objective, competent function that applies a systematic discipline approach, including the quality control, such procedure would be considered as internal controls, and obtaining evidence regarding the effectiveness of such controls would be the part of auditors' responses to assess the risk. See, there could be some departments which apply these unless they have an objectivity and they are competent enough and they follow a systematic discipline approach, they cannot be classified as an internal audit function, because internal audit function is a function just to carry on the to review and assess the design effectiveness of the controls, right? So that could also be, but they don't have a proper objective nature, right? That's why they will not be called as internal audit function, but those which have the competency and being objective and which follows a systematic and disciplined approach will be forming part under the internal audit function. Now, external auditor's responsibility. Now we have already gone over it, right? He continues to be responsible even though he uses the work of the internal auditors or the internal audit function. Checklist also we have determined, right? Like I have to decide whether I have to use the work of internal audit function. If all the internal auditors, if I have decided, then for the purpose for the internal audit function, I have to check whether the work will be adequate, and for the internal auditors, I have to check whether I will be able to appropriately direct, supervise, and review their work. Is also done. Now, definitions are done. Now, let's move on to the next area. Evaluating the internal audit function. Okay. External auditors shall determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used by evaluating the objectivity, the unbiased nature of the internal auditors, the level of competence, and the approach of the internal control, internal audit function, including the quality control. That's what we discussed, right? Systematic and disciplined approach. Okay. So, like we have something like in accounts, we will say like substantial period of length. Like this, in audit, it is like systematic and disciplined approach. Now, let's read it again. The external auditor shall determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used for the purpose of audit by evaluating the following: the extent to which the internal audit function, organization status, relevant policies, and procedures support the objectivity of the internal auditors. What is the status given to them? Whether it is unbiased. Okay, if I'm some employee, I have so many heads above me that I will not be able to exercise my objectivity or independence there, right? That's why that's organization status, relevant policies, and procedures should be used as a tool to evaluate his objectivity. Then level of competence, and then whether internal audit function applies a systematic and disciplined approach, including the quality control. Now, the external auditor shall not use the work when he shall not use opposite to this. Okay, just opposite to this. Does not adequately support the objectivity, then he lacks competence and does not apply a systematic and disciplined approach. This is a or condition. All three have to be satisfied to use the work of the internal audit function. Now, determining the nature of the and extent of the internal audit function work that can be used, right? External auditor shall determine the nature and extent of the work of the internal audit function that can be used by considering the nature and scope of the work of the internal audit function, its relevance to the external auditor's overall strategy and plan. See, what is the work I'm going to allocate to him? What is the type of work that is going to do? What is the internal audit function is going to do? What is the type of work the internal audit function is going to support me with? And that have to relate with my overall audit strategy and audit plan. Significant judgments and preventing undue use of the internal audit function. See, I have given the power to help me with the audit, right? He should not you get undue benefit out of it. Okay, that's what this means. So I should also be coordinating with them for making the significant judgments. Being sufficiently involved in the audit, I should be sufficiently involved in the audit so that at no case I will not. I will be in a position to know all the information that is there, which is known to that particular internal audit function. Communicated to TCWG as to how they have planned to use the audit. How I plan to use the work of internal audit function, I have to communicate that with the TCWG if applicable or the board of directors. Now, let's move on here. The external shall make all significant judgments in the audit engagement and to prevent undue use of the work of the internal audit function shall plan to use the less of the work of the function and perform more work directly. See, wherever there are significant judgment, I should be the one, that is the external auditor should be the one discussed it, right? I should be involved in making such judgment and I should ensure that he is not making some undue advantage out of it. Now, so such areas where significant judgment is involved, I may tell him that I will do that audit and I will use the less work from him. The more judgment is involved in planning and performing the relevant audit procedure, which procedure to perform here, that I should be determining. Okay, evaluating the audit evidence, whether this is sufficient and appropriate, I should be evaluating that one. Okay, whether the audit evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate should be evaluated by the external auditor. Higher the risk, assess the risk of material misstatement at the assertion level with specific consideration given risk to risk identified as significant. So those risks identified as significant, for example, it could be a fraud risk. Okay, for those areas, I will not assigning the work to the internal audit function. I myself will be doing that work. Okay, the less the internal auditors functions, organization status, relevant policies and procedures adequately support the objectivity, the less. Okay, but when the less objectivity is there, then I will not give more work to the internal audit function. The lower the level of competence, the same points, right? Now, using the work of internal audit function. Okay, where all I'm going to use the work of internal function. The external auditor shall perform sufficient audit procedure on the body of the work of the internal audit function as a whole, and the external auditor plans to use to determine its adequacy for the purpose of the audit, including evaluating whether the work of the properly planned, performed, supervised, reviewed, and documented. I have to check. It is like systematic and disciplined approach, right? In audit, we have discussed that work not documented as work not done, right? So they'll have to check whether till now they have performed certain procedures, right? Whether they have documented it properly. Sufficient appropriate audit evidence have been obtained to enable the function to draw reasonable conclusion. I will have to check the evidences which have been gathered by them and conclusions reached and check whether the evidences are and assumptions support the conclusions. Conclusion reached are appropriate in the circumstances. The reports prepared by the functions are consistent with the results of the work performed. I have to check. See, the evidence are saying that it's not proper. Okay, but I have the internal audit function has given the report that it is very perfect. Okay, which means the conclusions reached are not appropriate and it is not consistent with the results of the work performed. So these are things I have to check, I have to evaluate before I'm going to rely on such evidence to given by the internal audit function. The nature and extent of the external auditor's audit procedure shall be responsive to the external auditor's evaluation. So how much question I'm going to, we have discussed, right? If the external audit function is having less objectivity or less competence, I will do the more of my work with myself and I will delegate less work to them, right? Similarly, there are some factors same which I'm going to discuss here. This will be a question. Okay, amount of judgment involved. If a significant judgment is involved, I will do myself. I will not delegate it to him. Since the risk of material statement, significant risk is there, risk of fraud is there, then I will not delegate to him. I will do it myself. The extent to which the same point, just given a concise manner. Okay, support the objectivity, competence, reperformance of some work, something could be like that. Okay, now determining whether internal auditors can be used to provide internal auditors. Now that internal audit function is now done, now I'm going to discuss about internal auditors. Okay, the external auditors shall not use the work of internal auditor to provide direct assistance if there are significant threats to objectivity. Again, objectivity is not there. Lacks competence. Same points is going to be repeated again and again. 3 points. What are 3 points? Objectivity, competence, systematic, and disciplined approach. 6, 1, 10. Only 3 points should strike in your mind. Objectivity, competence, systematic, and disciplined approach. Okay. Now, same again. Judgment involved, assess risk of material misstatement, significant threats to objectivity. See. Now, the external auditor shall not use the internal auditor's work to provide direct assistance to perform procedures that involve significant judgment, higher risk of material misstatement, has already been seen. This is the new point. Right to the work with which the internal auditor has already been involved with, or which has already been, or which will be reported to the management or those such with governance by the internal audit function. Related to the decision the external auditor make in accordance with SA regarding the internal audit function, use of work of direct assistance. Where all I cannot use the work of internal auditor. First point is simple. Wherever there is significant judgment or wherever there is higher risk of material misstatement. Third point states that wherever the internal auditor has already been doing such work, okay, for review, see, doer and reviewer should be different, right? Maker checker approach. See, here already the internal auditor is the maker. I cannot apply the same work to him, right? Because the maker checker approach will be collapsed then, right? Or else, I cannot tell the internal auditor to review the works and the internal audit function. Okay, these are things where internal auditor's work will not be used. Also, there could be some work where which is there to external auditor to evaluate the internal auditor. Okay, but I cannot give directly to internal auditor itself. You evaluate your work. That's not proper, right? That's not fair. That's why these 4 points are there. Okay, now internal auditors to provide direct assistance for the purpose of the audit, the external auditor shall. He shall obtain a written agreement. Okay, let's see here. Yeah. Using the work of internal audit function. Before using the work of internal audit function, what a external auditor has to do? External auditor shall discuss the use of the internal audit function. He has to discuss the same with the whom? PCWG or board of directors or the internal audit function department itself, and then read the report of the internal audit function to check whether they have properly planned and performed the procedure, whether it is adequately documented, whether the conclusions are appropriate, or whether it is in line with the evidence obtained, right? Perform sufficient audit procedures to evaluate the internal audit function. So before we are moving to the next one, let's discuss this. The external auditor shall determine whether internal auditors can be used to provide direct assistance by evaluating existence and significance of the threats to objectivity, the level of competence of the internal auditors. External auditor shall determine the nature and extent of the work that can be providing direct assistance by considering the amount of judgment involved, as the risk of material misstatement, and the evaluation as mentioned above, which means existence and significance threats to objectivity and level of competence, the evaluation results. Okay, now next, involved in the audit and communicate the nature and extent of the plan used to internal auditors to provide direct assistance. The external auditor also shall document the same. Yeah. Now let's continue with the documentation. If the external auditor uses the work of the internal audit function, the external auditor shall include in the audit documentation the evaluation. The evaluation, what are things he has evaluated, the objectivity, competence, and the whether the internal audit function has applied systematic and disciplined approach, including the quality control, the nature of extent of the work and basis of that decision, and then audit procedure performed by the external auditor to evaluate the adequacy of the work used. Now, if he uses the work of the internal auditors, then he has to document the evaluation of existence and significance of threats to objectivity, level of competence, basis of decision, then who reviewed the work performed and the date and extent of the review, written agreements obtained from authorized representative, working papers prepared by the internal auditors who provide direct assistance on the audit engagement. Now, definition of internal audit function. The objective scope of internal audit function typically includes assurance and consulting activities designed to evaluate and improve the effectiveness of the entity's governance process, risk management, and internal control. See, for example, activities related to governance may be like performance management and accountability, communicating the risk and control. Then, risk management could be identifying and evaluating significant exposure to risk and contributing to improvement of the risk management, like reduction of fraud. Activities relating to internal control, evaluation of internal control, examination of financial and operating information, review of operating activities, review of compliance with laws and regulations. These could be an MCQ. Okay, they could be an MCQ which asks, pick the one which is not the activity relating to the internal control. We have to pick it out. And then, why the objectives of internal audit function and the external auditor differ. The function may perform audit procedures similar to those performed by the external auditor in an audit of financial statement. If so, the external auditor may make use of the function for the purpose of audit in one or more of the following ways. What? Some procedures being different. What I follow and what they follow is different. Then the internal audit functions is or have to perform the procedures in the manner in which the external auditor performs. Okay. For that, he can obtain the information that's relevant to the external auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement due to fraud or error. In this regard, SC 315 requires the external auditor to obtain an understanding of the nature of the internal audit function, responsibility, status within the organization, activities performed or to be performed, and make enquiries of the appropriate individuals within the internal audit function. Unless prohibited or restricted to some extent by law or regulation, the external auditor, after appropriate evaluation, will decide to use the work of that has been performed by the internal audit function during the period in partial substitution of all evidence to be obtained directly by the external auditor. Now, we already discussed, right? Objectivity means unbiasedness, right? Objectivity refers to ability to perform those tasks without allowing bias, conflict of interest, or undue influence of others to override professional judgment. Factors that may affect the external auditor's evaluation include organizational status, then internal audit function free of any conflicting responsibilities, whether those charged with governance oversee the employment decision related to internal audit function, whether there are any constraints or restrictions placed on the internal audit function by the management or TCWG, whether the internal auditors are members of relevant professional bodies and the membership are obligate the compliance with relevant professional standards relating to objectivity. For example, let's see. Okay, organization status. For example, there could be an internal audit function that reports to TCWG. Okay, TCWG has a direct influence. Okay, then there is no right, like what to say, making the internal function right, getting their work. If there is to check the conflicting responsibility, for example, the managerial and operational duties are also carried out by the internal function because they're independent. They should not carry out these activities. oversee employment decision. That is teachability oversee the employment decision. Okay, so to get a better performance bonus, what an internal audit function will do, they will give good reports. That should not be a case. I have to check whether there are any constraints or restrictions. For example, the internal audit findings will not be directly communicated to the external audit. It has to be routed via the management. Then it is not proper. Now, internal audit function refers to attainment and maintenance of knowledge and skills of the function as a whole at the level required to enable assigned tasks to perform diligently and in accordance with the applicable professional standards. What are the factors that may affect adequately and appropriately resourced? See, if I'm going to take an entity worth 1,000 crores, okay, turnover, then I will at least have a team of 15 persons. Okay, for each area, I will deploy 1% or 2%, right? So I have to check whether the firm is adequately sized. Then, whether they established a policy for hiring, everything is proper, hiring, training, and everything is proper. The internal auditors have adequate technical training and proficiency in auditing. Then, whether internal auditors possess the required knowledge relating to the financial reporting and applicable financial reporting framework. Members of professional bodies where they are giving continuous professional development requirements. See, for example, we have CPE hours, even beyond qualification. That likewise, whether the internal auditors also have something. Then, the more the internal audit functions, organize status, level, and policy and procedures support the objectivity, the higher level of competence, and the more likely the external auditor may use the work of the function and in more areas. So, if it is everything is good, then I will be using the function, right? Now, factors that may affect the external auditor's determination of whether the internal audit function applies systematic and disciplined approach, including the following. Like I have to check whether there is existing any documentation of work, whether it is adequate, whether it is properly properly being used. Okay. Then whether the internal audit function is appropriate quality control procedures and policies. For example, those policies are set out in SQC1. Okay. Now, circumstances when work of the internal audit function cannot be used. When there is no proper audit evidence to support the work, okay, or else there is self-review threat. Okay. See here. A statutory auditor of an entity cannot be its internal auditor as it's will not be possible for him to give an independent opinion, right? Because it is a self-review thing. I am also already doing the work of what the audit function. Now I cannot be a statutory auditor of the company. Example of the work of the internal audit function that can be used by the external auditor include the following. Where all I can use the work of internal audit function. I can use for testing the operating effectiveness of control. Substantive procedure including limited judgment. Inventory count I can use. Then tracing the transaction through information system relevant to financial reporting. For some transaction, I have to find where is the origin. For that, I can use their work. Testing the compliance with regulatory requirements. In some circumstances, audits or review of financial information of subsidiaries that are not significant to the group. So, immaterial subsidiaries, I can hand over to them. Okay. Judgments in planning and performing audit procedures and evaluating the results. Since the external auditor has the sole responsibility for the audit opinion expressed, and the external auditor needs to make significant judgments on the audit engagement in accordance with paragraph 18. Significant judgments include the following. What does significant judgment mean? Assessing the risk of material misstatement, evaluating sufficiency of tested performance, evaluating the appropriateness of the management's use of going concern assumption. Then, significant accounting estimates evaluation, evaluating the adequacy of the disclosure in the financial statements and other matters affecting the auditor's report. See, these are the areas that we tested by the audit no matter what, right? If I give all these areas to the internal auditor or the internal audit function, then why I am appointed? They could have done the audit themselves, right? That's why these are restricted to these are the areas that are restricted to be done only by the external auditor. Now, assess the risk. Significant risk requires special audit consideration, and therefore the external auditor's ability to use the work of the internal audit function in relation to significant risk will be restricted to procedures that involve limited judgment. Okay, whenever there is limited judgment, I will use the work of internal auditor or internal audit function. But whenever there is significant judgment, I myself, that is external auditor myself, will do the audit or do the particular work. In discussing the planned use of their work with the internal audit function as a basis of coordinating the respective activities, it may be useful to address the following. I have to say, which is the timing of such work, nature of the work to be performed, extent of coverage, materiality of the financial statements as a whole, and then the performance materiality, and then propose the method for sample size, and then documentation and review of reporting procedures. Coordination between the external auditor and internal audit function is effective. And for example, discussions are taken place at appropriate intervals. External audit informs the internal audit function significant matters that may affect. Right. Then, external auditor is advised of and have access to the relevant reports of the internal audit function and is informed of any significant matters that come to the attention of the function when such matter affect the work of the external auditor, so that the external auditor is able to consider the implications of such matter for the audit engagement. Procedures to which the external auditor may perform to evaluate the quality of the work performed and the conclusion reached by the internal audit function. So I have to evaluate the quality of the work and adequacy. So by what procedure I can do it? I can make inquiries. Okay, I can observe the procedures. I can review their reports or the work program or the work paper. Then there are things I could do. Then reperformance. Reperformance involves external auditors' independent execution of procedures to validate the conclusions reached by the internal audit function. There could be some calculations. I could reperform it so that I am quite comfortable with the reached. Then same. Like we had for internal audit function, same similar point for objectivity. The extent of organization status, then family and personal relationship. Family and personal relationship. Then association with the division or department, because if they're so close, then I will not delegate some work to that internal auditor. Interest other than remuneration, Now, the internal auditor, external auditor is careful to limit such work to those areas that would be appropriate to assign. For example, tasks that appropriate to use the internal auditors to provide direct assistance. Tasks that will not be appropriate. See, it is not appropriate. For example, discussion of significant risk, because significant risk includes fraud risk, right? Determination of unannounced audit procedure as addressed in SA 240 relating to fraud. Now, see, as per SA 505, the external auditor is required to send external confirmation procedure, right? So for that, I will not be able to get the help of internal auditor. But for assembling the information, for segregating the information for those which are positive, those which are negative, I can take the help of internal auditor. Direction, supervision, and review with external auditor. Excessive use of internal auditors to provide direct assistance may affect the perception regarding the independency. If I'm going to use entire work from the internal auditor rather than from my article assistant or my managers, then it is pakka waste. I should not be appointed, right? Because it's going to affect my independence. The last point for the day. Using the internal auditors to provide direct assistance. As individuals, the internal audit functions are not independent of the entity as required of the financial statement. The external auditor's direction, supervision, and review of the work performed by the internal auditors providing direct assistance will generally be of a different nature, more extensive than see, I am going to review the work performed by some dependent person to the entity. Okay, so what I have to exercise? I have to exercise greater control to ensure that the work is not work is not biased. Okay, work is very proper. Then, in directing the internal auditors, external auditor, for example, remind the internal auditors to bring the accounting and auditing issues identified during the audit to attention of the external auditor. Whenever some area is delegated, then I have to remind the internal auditor to make me informed of any issues that are being found in that during the course of the audit. In reviewing the work performed by the internal auditors, the external consideration include whether the evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate. Evidence should be sufficient and appropriate. Sufficient and appropriate in the circumstance, and that it supports the conclusion reached. Okay, so with this, we have covered the return on the big standard SA 610. Hope you understood all the points. If you really find this video useful, please do hit the like button and share with your friends and subscribe for better reach. Thank you so much.